Hey, good morning, everyone. Do you want to make really cool houses? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to work with rocks and make them look super realistic. So stay tuned and get ready to chew on this because it's going to be a mouthful. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, of course, start with a basic shape. And in this case, we're going to start with, say, rectangle. And then we're just going to draw or lightly sketch in where we think our rocks are going to be placed. And you see, don't let the lines of the rectangle constrain you. You can absolutely go outside of those lines because it's there just as a basic frame so you can build with. Think of it like the frame of a real house. Now, what I like to do then is I put another layer on top of that and I just start sketching in where I think the shadows are going to go. I use an airbrush and I use a G-pen. And I just lightly sketch where I think the light's going to hit. Notice that I've got thicker lines on the bottom of the rocks and where the light's really kind of creating that really cool deep shadow. And then, of course, the tops of the rocks are going to be a little bit lighter because they're going to be catching more of the ambient light around it. And then in the shadow area, I can make those really almost as dark as I want to because it's a shadow. But I wanted to make sure that where the light is and where the shadow is there's really good contrast so that the front of it really stands out. And again, you'll see that everything is very loose and sketchy. And as I build on it, I will then get finer and finer with the detail. Now, the next layer that I'm using is called a color layer. And the cool thing about a color layer is that it's going to automatically detect what values are underneath it, and we'll just start to create that color value. So where it's darker, it'll be a darker blue, and it's lighter, it'll be a lighter blue. And again, being very sketchy. And my own personal technique is as I keep building layers on top of each other, I'll eventually, when I get to 3 or 4 layers, I'll combine them and then I start rebuilding on top of it. So it's almost like I treat digital art like clay. It's just something I keep building on. But what I found is that creates a richness of texture and value, and it gives it that more of a realistic, worn, organic look to it. And what I'm doing here is where I'm sketching in some fine lines of the rocks where there'd be some bounce light. And I'm also giving the rocks a bit more form by showing the individual edges as they would be on the rocks. And this is kind of a 3-dimensional technique. So as you can see, the blue is a little bit lighter blue, and then the darker color is a little bit darker. So it really makes those rock edges pop out away from the whole design. And just remember, if in doubt, just ask yourself, does this look cool or does it look boring? If it looks boring, then just hit Control Z. If it looks cool, then keep it. And maybe you want to get a second opinion, but I typically don't. I just, if it looks cool to me and I'm happy with it, then that's really all that matters. Unless you're doing work for a client, then of course it absolutely matters what the client thinks. Now what I like to do is I tend to add multiply layers on top of my existing layers, and then I add additional shading on top of that. And I find that it makes my shadows look a little bit more richer. And then I erase off of that layer, parts that I don't need. That's what you're seeing me do here right now, as a matter of fact. Oh, and then I'm adding an overlay layer. And the cool thing about an overlay layer is you can bring in other colors and really bring out, some magic, if you will, into your design. So here I added some purple. And now I'm going back over my cracks with kind of a lighter purple to get an additional reflective color. And to pull the whole design out of the background, I'm using a little bit larger G-pen, and it just pulls the whole image away from the background and adding in some of those areas where it's going to get super dark. Now, while I use the word black, I'm not actually using true black. I'm really just using a really darker version of my existing colors. It just looks like it's black. So an illusion. It's all an illusion. And then I'm adding in some noise to the rocks to give it that more of a texture and that more of a magical kind of glowy feel to it. Now we're kind of ready to start adding in some of our background features. So I haven't quite decided yet if I'm just going to do like a grassy field that's overgrown with like weeds. But that's the vibe I was feeling at the moment. So that's what I'm going with. And of course, I'm just going to vary my colors: darker greens, lighter greens, considering where the bounce light might be coming from. Really loose, really sketchy, and pretty non-committal still at this point. Just want the design to look good. And this is a good opportunity to experiment with your different brushes and see what kind of shapes that you can get out of with them. I use probably the G pen 90% of the time, or a round brush, because I like the way I get the thick to thin of them. But I've also noticed that when I use a round brush, that I don't get too thin and scraggly looking. Because I've noticed over the years some of my lines, when I squint or I look away at those lines that I put in, they all look like little scratches, and I don't like that. I like things to look more intentional and add to the overall form of the design. And sometimes scratchy lines, you're just maybe doing it as a concept, but scratchy lines sometimes can be, it just looks like your design was rushed. So I'm trying to work hard to not do that anymore. You can see as I'm playing around with the lights and the darks, you can really kind of pull out the areas that you like. And of course, this would be a Jeffrey Hunt piece if I didn't add some trees in there somewhere. So I like to add trees, probably where trees wouldn't normally grow, but in this particular instance, I'm thinking, this house has been forgotten and things are starting to grow in and around it. Gives it that more of a fantasy type of a feel. And here I've used a darker color again to add in some detail cuts into the rocks. This is to take account to erosion over the years. The rocks getting really hot and then getting cold and just starting to and kind of see I'm getting a little scratchy again. So what I'll end up doing here at some point is I'll take a blending brush. Blending brush kind of helps get rid of some of that scratchiness as well, if you just go over those lines. So now I'm about to start working with contrast. You're going to see me create kind of a big yellow circle behind this. And on the color wheel, this yellow is a direct opposite of this now bluish purple color that I've chosen for the house. And it really, you just see how it just jumps off of the canvas. So whenever you can do opposite colors in your color schemes, you're going to get a lot of really cool effects. And I'm just taking that yellow and adding it to the design as additional bounce light. And you can see it just kind of absorbing that additional color. And I'm using a overlay layer again, as well as a multiply. I'm adding in some additional cuts to the rocks, as well as some additional line detail, and just really going to town with how I want this to look. It is always okay to change your mind halfway through a design. Don't ever feel like you're committed to the way something looks. There is a good full practice. I'll mention, creating a grayscale image and being really rough just to kind of at least see where you want your lights and darks to be. But just consider that as like a roadmap to your destination. You've been on a road trip and you take a drive and you suddenly see a road that you haven't gone down. I mean, that is a really good analogy for art, because sometimes you're going to run across a technique that you never tried before, and you're going to want to just add that into your piece. So you're doing like 90% of the thing that you're good at, and then you're adding in 10% of something that you've never really done before. And in this case, playing around with overlay layers and experimenting with color values, that was where I was gravitating toward as I was creating this. And you should always feel like you grew in some way when you complete something. That's why it's so important to finish your work. Finish your designs, because it's like you're leveling up. If you're playing like Boulders Gate 3 or any other type of game where you learn a new skill and you level up, I mean, that's art as well. Because when you practice and you create, and once you've finished, you get those experience points and you can apply it to the next one. So like when you fight the bad guys again, you're no longer level 1 anymore. Now you're like level 5 and you get all these cool spells. And the spells are really just the tricks of the trade of what you're learning as you're creating art. And you just let the magic happen. I will mention Baldur's Gate 3. I love that game. It's also been the bane of my existence because I want to keep playing it, and when I play it, I don't draw, so I have to kind of take it with like a box of candy. I can't eat too much. So this is a watercolor brush. I'm adding in the background, some bushes, and then in the back, and some lighter bushes up front with some dead or dying twigs in the foreground. Really like the watery look that this gives. Keeping in mind where I want the shadows to be and toward the front, so it's a little bit darker. And I'm just experimenting with different brushes. There's, in particular, the round brush, the G pen, and the watercolor brush is what I'm using to do the landscape. And I'm trying to create the effect of like some of that green overgrowth, like coming up from the ground. Almost like some vines that have just gone out of control and are starting to take over this rock house. And I'm just blending it in with the blending brush. And that was a saturation layer, so I made that sun kind of pop a little bit more, adding a saturation layer to the back and pulling up the values a little bit higher, or at least the saturation a little bit higher. And again, I got some more contrast now going against the sky with the reds and the yellows. And I just have a generic grass brush that I found. So I'm just adding in some additional, more detailed foreground with that particular brush, alternating the colors. Since it's up close, I wanted to get more ground detail closer to the viewer, and still less detail at a distance. The trees that I've added are really just that darker color with an overlay layer on top of them with that purple reflecting off of it. And now I'm going to advance the time lapse a little bit. I'm starting to see that the colors are kind of blending together a little bit. So I need to do that by changing the saturation, excuse me, the luminosity of the scene. So I used a modification layer to lower the luminosity, get some more shadow, and that brought back the contrast that I was looking to maintain. And to unify the colors, I'm going to add in a gradient matte specific for the foreground, and I'm just going to erase it all back off. And then I've copied and pasted the different layers, 2 different layers of the house, so that it looks like there's more of them in the background. And just adding some additional details of grass. Now, what I'm doing right now is pretty important. So what you want to do is always consider your storytelling value to your viewer. What do I mean by that? Well, your art should invoke some type of an emotion or a feeling. That's what keeps people looking at your art and engaging with your art, is by adding in subtle details that tell a story without there being a written narrative. And the way I'm going to do that is by adding in very subtle details on this door to make it look, again, very aged, very old, and it's going to cause people, you'll ask questions like, well, who lives here? How tall are the people that live here? Are they as tall as this door? And why did they leave a sign that says that they're not here? Is someone looking for them? Is there a reason why they're not there? Are they running away? Or were they expecting someone who never came and potentially just left a sign to let someone know that they just aren't here anymore? So how do you feel now about drawing fantasy rocks? Did you learn something from this? If so, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you don't already, to get more of these awesome tutorials that I'll be making throughout 2026. And I'd really be interested in what you guys think. Was this helpful? Would you like to see more of these types of videos? Leave those in the comments, and have a great rest of your day, and stay warm out there.